On episode 115 of the Vincast, I chat with Eliza and Angela Brown, fourth generation members of one of Australia's most important wine families and co-owners of All Saints Estate in Rutherglen. Hello there, Vincasters. Welcome to another episode of Australia's premier wine podcast, the Vincast, with myself, James Scaresbrook, also known as the Intrepid Wino. I'm really excited to have a new episode for you this week. It was a lovely chat I recorded last year. It's been a bit of a struggle, actually, finding time to dedicate myself fully to the Vincast of late, apart from work being busy, and also, I've got some grapes coming in to make a little bit more wine for myself this year. Very excited. I'm going to be sharing my experiences as much as possible on my YouTube channel. Make sure to keep an eye on that. But also, I'm about to become a father, so there's lots of preparations involved with that as well. So if I don't get episodes of the podcast out as much as I would like to over the next couple of months, I do apologise. It is just that I'm really flat out with lots of different stuff, but I will endeavour to record as often as I can and provide you with some more fantastic wine stories, just like this episode. I sat down with Eliza and Angela Brown of the Brown brothers fame, the Brown family, based in Victoria. The Angela and Eliza's father bought All Saints Estate in the Rutherglen region of northeastern Victoria, and they now run that with their brother Nick. And they're doing some amazing things. So I was really thrilled to be involved with a tasting, looking at some very old fortified wines from All Saints, but also to find out all about the All Saints story and the Brown story. So I hope you enjoy this week's episode. Please stick around to the end so you can find out how to get in touch with all of us to let us know. But until then, I'll see you on the other side. Eliza, Angela, thank you for making some time here in beautiful, not quite sunny South Yarra. It's December. Where's the weather? Come on. Of course, teasing us. The morning after a really incredible tasting of some very beautiful old fortified wines. But thank you for being on the Vincast.
Thanks for having us, James.
I, as possibly both of you know, start every episode of the podcast asking my guests if they can remember the first interaction that they had with wine that made them think differently about it. Now, of course, in your cases, you come from multi-generation, so wine has been a part of your lives since you were born, no doubt. But do you guys remember when you first sort of thought about wine, in a more profound way?
Oh, for me, I think it was Mum and Dad having many dinner parties at home. We grew up around wine and amongst the vineyard and running around playing games in the winery and things, but I think the special moments were those when Mum and Dad had friends over to the house and they had long dinner parties. We'd be put to bed early, but you'd listen to the dinner parties happening for the rest of the night, and they just seemed to be having so much fun.
Yeah. Did you get to taste anything?
Yeah, we did.
Beforehand?
Yeah, we as a family always sat down for dinner most nights of the week. And we're given a small taste of the wine that Mum and Dad were drinking. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember when that started. It just seemed to be forever, really. Yeah. And
it's sort of the same for you, Eliza?
Mine probably was a bit more naughtier. But my cousin Cynthia and I, when Brown Brothers was really small, we'd be running around the winery. There was no OH&S, which was kind of fun, wasn't it, making cubbies. And the family cellar at Brown Brothers was a kind of a place, a bit of a playground. And I always loved finding old stuff and history. And we'd find all these really old bottles of wine and open them up. And I think we would have been probably 10 or 11, 1954 bottles of Grenache, Mondeuse, and really have no idea what we were doing, but thinking that we were so sophisticated and tasting it and going, wow, this is quite amazing. But those moments were kind of, really imprinted in my mind because it was such a special time of our lives. Probably being 11 and drinking red, I think, was pretty sophisticated, really. But it was just being naughty.
I didn't acquire a taste for wine until I was, I think, at least 19 or 20. So I think that's probably part of that. Coming from a wine family, it sort of maybe happens a little bit earlier.
Yeah,
and certainly, I think it's been long enough. The statute of limitations as far as underage drinking is well and truly past. So I'm sure, your parents are off the hook in that case. So
I guess we grew up in a European-style family, but it wasn't European, having been introduced to wine so early. Yeah, so we were introduced to it in a responsible way.
Good. Absolutely. And you had a fairly solid understanding of that wine was the family business from a young age?
I don't think I really understood it until I went away to school and parents were treating me really nicely. I'd stay at somebody's house on a weekend and they'd say, Eliza, it's lovely to have you. I'm just wondering if you could have a look at my cellar. And I'm thinking, I'm 16, I have no idea what I'm talking about. But they were just so interested in having somebody from a wine family, I suppose, staying with them. And I didn't really understand that until probably a little bit later, at 17, that we had this little special business, which is now, a bigger business, Brown Brothers. But it was kind of a interesting journey, I suppose, of understanding what you have, and then really appreciating it as you get older, of all the hard work that went into it.
Yeah, I think growing up, you appreciate it now, looking back, and especially being a parent. The long days that Dad did working, and he was really in amongst it. Every time there was a frost in the vineyard, he had an alarm bell set up beside his bed. And it would go off, 3 o'clock in the morning, and the whole house would wake up with this bell, and he'd run down to the winery to put the sprinklers on, and it was all-encompassing, really. On the busy weekends, all the family were working behind cellar door, and Mum and my aunties had a catering business. They were cooking food for all of the guests at the winery, so it was just life, really.
So you have a reasonably large, extensive family, and they were all involved, well, not all, but they were mostly involved with Brown Brothers at that time?
Yeah, so we grew up at Milawa, and Dad had 3 brothers. Each of them had, I think there's 10 of us in total, 10 grandchildren, I guess. Of
eight amazing women.
8 girls, 2 boys, yeah. We grew up fairly close by. I had cousins just 500 metres down the road, and others in a little town nearby. So we all saw each other a lot. We had 2 older cousins, and then the 3 of us, Eliza, Nick, and myself, and then 5 or 6. I'm not very good at maths. 5 or so younger ones.
Right. Okay. So I'm always really confused as far as where Milawa sits. Is that part of the King Valley or the Alpine Valleys?
Oh,
it's the bridge between them, isn't it?
It's the King. They call it the King Valley.
Okay.
Yeah, it's sort of on in the floor of the valley, I suppose, and then 20 so minutes away is Moreau, then Whitfield. So sort of running back south to Melbourne.
Back to but it's. I found it when I went to the King Valley. Eventually, I found it interesting that I had to kind of cut back towards Melbourne. It's a kind of a really interesting way to get into the King Valley.
Yeah, absolutely. Or you could go over the hill, which is sometimes a bit dodgy.
Yeah.
There's deer and everything. Yeah, it's amazing. It's an amazing area. It's beautiful.
So what was it like kind of growing up in that part of Victoria?
Oh, Angela and I think, we always look back at our childhood and think how incredible it was. We're really very lucky kids. We just on our bikes riding, skiing. There's so much beauty and natural beauty and great activities you could do in the area. And I think that's probably why I really wanted to go back home and live, and eventually I'm living in Rutherglen. But it's just such a beautiful part of the world to live. And it's like I always call it kind of a little mini Europe in a way, because we've got all these different wine regions around us that produce quite different styles of wine. Like the King Valley is cooler climate. Rutherglen's only an hour and 20 minutes away, and it's a little bit warmer. And we do quite different styles. And then heading towards Alpine Valleys, they're different again. So it's a really special part of the world.
So, as far as the Brown family, what was it that brought them to that part of Victoria, and how did kind of they get into the wine business?
Yeah, it's a bit of a long story, but our great-great-grandfather arrived as an immigrant into the area, and he bought the land at the first land sale in the district.
Mm-hmm.
So back in 1880s.
Yeah.
And then there were a lot of Italians and immigrants coming to the area in the time, so he decided he might start making some wine and sell it to them. So thanks to the Italians, the business started to take off.
Right.
Yeah. So
we would sell it by the barrel. So they come with either their own barrels or, and we'd fill it up, and then they take their barrels away on a cart.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. And then our grandfather eventually started selling wine. The winery was getting a bit bigger and started selling wine to other wineries in Rutherglen, namely All Saints.
Mm-hmm.
And he used to go on the cart with his father and what do you call it? Ride? Ride all the way to All Saints, sell massive big barrels of wine to All Saints, and then ride all the way back. So it would be a 2 or 3 day trip just to do that. And I think that Mr. Sutherland Smith at the time was quite a negotiator, and Pop really didn't like that. So he ended up buying it in the end. But yeah, it was a kind of a pretty amazing time. They did things quite hard, in a very hard, tough way. And got to kind of remember that now. We're pretty lucky about how we run businesses.
yeah, they did. They what Dad used to talk about, his earliest memories were going to the train station, putting all the barrels on the train to send down to Melbourne.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a real family affair.
When did they start bottling wine?
I'm not sure.
Oh, it'd have to be pretty early.
Yeah, pretty early. They put in a bottling line pretty early on.
Yeah, they
didn't
did, yeah.
But they were still selling, a fair amount of bulk wine, as it were, in barrels, that kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely. Bulk was quite a large part of our business up until the early 90s, actually,
Right.
yeah. And then we decided that we didn't want to be reliant on that business going forward, but and we changed the business around. So for the better, I think.
So, growing up, did you both have a real sense of the heritage, the importance of family, and the I guess the position that the Brown family had in the Australian wine industry?
Oh, I think we appreciate it more now than we did then. It was just part of life then.
Yeah.
It's definitely family was important. Even though Nana didn't have a official title in the business, she was always running around busy, turning up at the office at 10 o'clock every morning to make cheese on toast for her husband, our grandfather, and her 4 boys. And that was like clockwork. She never missed that.
No, she didn't. And then she'd go through all the mail, and she'd distribute the mail because that was her way of being able to meet or see all the staff. So she'd take all the mail around to the staff and really have an understanding of what's going on in the business. And so she was kind of the unofficial CEO, really, wasn't she?
Yeah. And she saw a piece of mail. She'd just, oops, sorry, I opened that one. She'd miss a beat.
Is everything okay? It was pretty funny.
Yeah.
And I think for all of us, we really didn't have any understanding about what the business was like to the outside world, really.
Right.
We're very into living in Milawa, kids, and we were never treated by our parents any differently, really.
No, or anybody else.
No. So I think for us, it was just watching our parents working really, really hard and building a business, and they expected us to do the same thing, and that was it.
But your dad and all 3 of his brothers are all involved with the family business?
So Ali probably have to tell this long story, but Uncle John and Uncle Ross. Uncle John's retired. Uncle Ross is semi-retired, but I don't think he'll ever retire really. But and then our dad unfortunately passed away in 2005.
But they were, when you were growing up, they were all
absolutely,
involved.
Yeah. Okay. And Roger as well. So he was the youngest, and they all had their own areas, which I think worked out really well. Uncle John was winemaking, Ross was marketing, sales.
Isn't that with a wine family? Isn't that kind of the point? Is that you are producing employees?
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't actually have to pay. It's like, well, you just get a dividend from the company.
Well, the more family members, probably.
They're going to be more loyal anyway.
Well, sometimes
you hope.
Yeah, you'd hope that. But I think for the four boys, when they went into the business, Pop really needed the help, and he pulled Dad out of school to go back to Brown Brothers and work, and they all had their specific areas. And Roger, the youngest, he was, and because they were growing so quickly, he was in charge of grafting. So he was just grafting over old vineyards and propagating, and Dad was vineyard manager. But I was talking to Uncle John the other day, and it was quite funny. He said, your father just really loved growing grapes. And I'd say to him, stop growing so many grapes because we can't fit it in the winery. And he said, but that's my job. And so obviously, when you're growing, and we're going through this at the moment, there becomes like that, tension of growth where every person in the business is trying to do the best in their areas. And I think sometimes, they also needed a whole lot of structure put into place where they go from small family business to bigger business, and so that sort of happened during the 80s.
Yeah, we're thinking about that a lot at the moment with All Saints in that growth stage, and we often talk about, what did Dad and his brothers do? How did they get through those times? So,
yeah. It's been good to be able to look back and see how they've done things.
Right. So for each of you, I'm interested to know, did you both think, that you would work in wine industry, or did you entertain ideas about possibly doing something else? Was there always the expectation that you were going to be involved in family business?
Oh, we've had a long running family mantra that we should all do 4 years outside experience before we are allowed to come back into the family business.
Within the industry or outside of the wine industry?
Anywhere.
Anywhere,
just 4
okay.
years somewhere else to stuff up and then come home. No, not really.
You're supposed to stuff up in somebody else's business.
You're allowed to make mistakes when there's sort of, there isn't, it's someone else's mistakes to make.
Yeah. So I think because Dad really started work very early on in the family business, he was very aware of getting that outside experience too. So he always encouraged us to go off and do what we want to do from an early age. So I studied graphic design and worked in the advertising industry for a long time, and then had my own little business for a while. And it was always in the back of my mind. I always wanted to somehow work back in the wine industry, but I wasn't sure at the time how that would work because I was only, around 20 or something. And then when Dad died, that sort of put everything into a different perspective, and I got involved in the business a lot earlier than I thought I would have, but I probably would have just happened a bit sooner.
But you had an interest in art, I guess, and that kind of creative expression.
Yeah, so I found actually that it did match quite well in the end. I could fit in and be involved with a lot of the marketing and graphic design for the wine industry, which I think having someone with those skills in-house is invaluable.
When you were away from wine business, did you kind of find it refreshing that people kind of would hear the name Brown and not have immediate, expectations or, say,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was sort of nice to sort of create your own path.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good.
But presumably you still would have made friends who would say, we can get cheap wine?
Yeah. I made lots of friends.
I don't know whether they're real friends.
What about you, Eliza?
I was in advertising as well, so I worked as an account executive.
Okay.
So I was the suit, Angela was the creative. So I had to try and keep the creatives under control, which never worked.
Not in the same organisation.
No,
right?
not
Okay.
different ends of St Kilda Road. But yeah, it was great. I worked for a company, J. Walter Thompson, and I was one of thousands of people in that company. So it was an incredibly good learning experience. It started from the bottom and worked my way
And
up.
now we're here. Sorry.
Yeah, I know, but
it's a drag
I don't know
song.
whether I've gone sideways, maybe. But no, it was fantastic. It taught me how to negotiate with people, especially creative people, which is perfect in the wine industry because you're always negotiating with a winemaker.
Well, and that certainly
and,
would have helped as far as the negotiations between Angela and yourself.
Yeah, oh, and
as the
Nick.
creative.
Yeah, well, and Nick's the creative too, so he's
True,
the winemaker.
very
So
true.
I've got the two creatives, but I think it works really well having that experience outside and doing different things. And I was in hospitality when I was studying as well, and that's been an invaluable experience to have with our business now. So
Yeah, I think we were always encouraged to, when we were at university, to have a job, and we've all done that.
yeah, but you were crap. You were
Yeah,
really
it's
crap at
terrible.
hospitality.
It's terrible at it. That's because we worked
You
that
got-
out
you-
early on.
She got sacked.
That makes
No, I didn't.
no. To be honest, that makes two of us.
I just couldn't fathom everyone else was having a good time.
You couldn't fathom it, or you just went, "This is not fair."
Yeah, exactly.
We're still doing that.
Yeah, I know. It's okay now.
I did sort of have just enough hospitality experience to actually be able to look at someone working hospitality and have great respect for them and
Yeah.
sort of say, they're just trying to do their job. I don't
Yeah.
want to, and it makes me annoyed when I see other, patrons of a venue behaving poorly and putting it onto the staff and saying, look, like they're just trying to, make your experience better.
Yes. It's
Why are you
hard.
trying to make it harder for them?
It's probably one of the hardest jobs, I think. Yeah.
Oh, it is insanely hard. Yeah.
Quite physically demanding as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was it that drew you both into advertising? What was the interest there?
I always had a creative bent at school, I guess. I enjoyed photography and graphic design. So I don't know how we ended up that way. I guess Mum and Dad are pretty creative.
I think Dad was always. I think Dad wanted to be an architect, but Pop said to him that wouldn't be the right path to go down. I think he should be a viticulturist. But I think the whole family
Build vineyards, not houses.
Yeah. That when in the 80s, Brown Brothers did this advertising campaign, and it was a really beautiful campaign done by a man called David Frost from a Sydney advertising agency, and it was all really painterly and beautifully drawn and handwritten, and people would hang them in their houses. Amazing, sort of beautiful portraits, weren't they?
So do you think that kind of, if Brown Brothers hadn't been the kind of brand that would have engaged in advertising, do you think that kind of influenced you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did work experience with him up in Sydney when I was, I think I was probably 13 or 14.
Wow, okay.
And for a week, and I just thought that was the most amazing thing ever. Spending a whole week with in an advertising agency up there, and I really wanted to pursue that when I left school. Yeah, I think that's probably what kicked my interest.
So for both of you, but in, I guess, different ways, that gave you a real exposure to communication and that vital, whether it be in the boardroom, as it were, in terms of negotiations, or in terms of explaining to a client, as based on their brief, how a campaign is going to work for them, or whether it's communicating through visual language. That would have. Do you think that kind of really helped you as far as when you came back to work in the wine industry? Do you think that was a really important experience to have?
Yeah, I think too. Angela, Nick, and I all love design as well, and I don't know where that came from, our maternal grandmother or dad or mum, but they all love beautifully designed things. And when we all got back to All Saints and started working together, we really didn't have to talk about how we package things or design things very much because we all had the same
It's
ideas
very
and
lucky.
tastes.
Very lucky, same taste.
And I think we've really enjoyed that part of growing that business and making all the packaging look beautiful and probably a bit more fashionable, and we're always looking out for new ideas of how to design things better or more interesting to capture people's interest, because we're All Saints is such a small business. That's the only way we can really, other than really great wine, is the packaging and the way that we promote ourselves, I suppose.
And I have to say that the website is absolutely stunning.
Oh, thanks.
I'm sure it took a lot of work. I know that
Websites.
So when did All Saints become part of the picture, as it were?
Dad and his brothers bought All Saints in the early 90s.
Okay.
92.
Yeah, I think they'd always heard about Pop's love affair with his stories about going over there and buying wine. So it came up for sale in 92. The previous owners had unfortunately gone into receivership, and the bank had taken over, so it was for sale. So they went over and checked it out and thought it was an amazing opportunity. So they purchased the property, and Dad spent a lot of time renovating it. It had gone into a bit of disrepair, so Dad was the main person running the renovations of the gardens and buildings and things. So he'd spent a good couple of years immersed in it. And a few years later, his brothers decided that they all decided they wanted to concentrate on the American market more with the Brown Brothers brand. So they were keen to sell All Saints again, but Dad had fallen in love with it, so he couldn't sell it. So he purchased it off his brothers, but remained a shareholder at Brown Brothers.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So
it's complicated, and we always say we'll get a whiteboard out. But
I heard someone ask, it's like, "Oh, you're those Browns."
Yeah.
Oh, good on you.
We're the blonde Browns, apparently. The blonde poor ones.
Yeah. We're always trying to. It's hard to explain, but so Dad just continued there and continued building that business and remained a shareholder at Brown Brothers and was on the board there. And then, as Eliza said, died in 2005, so we took over his ownership of All Saints and a little winery next door as well, actually, St Leonard's, which Dad and his brothers had bought earlier in the 80s.
1980.
Yeah. So they actually sold that one as well, so Dad bought the two of them at the same time. When he died, we took over those two and remained shareholders at Brown Brothers with our cousins.
But the Browns have, long had a history with fortified wines and with the Rutherglen, which, those two are so intrinsically linked. And that was no doubt part of the interest or the love of that part of Victoria, and, as far as that style of wine.
Yeah.
But most definitely, when your dad bought All Saints, this was at a time when fortified wine had sort of lost its luster, as it were, and I'm sure that must have been a pretty daunting prospect to take on, a business, a brand, a winery with such an important focus on fortified wines. Do you know if that kind of
Dad was really
scared him at all?
No, he just didn't get scared of stuff. Like, he'd say, "So I'm going to do this," and you think, "Well, that's crazy," and he'd like, "It'll be fine." And he just backed himself, and that's what I kind of admired about him. He didn't really care what anyone else thought. He'd always come up with these, not crazy, but interesting inventions or ideas. And then, 10 years down the track, everybody be doing it. But he was just a bit ahead of his time. But when he came to us and told us that he was going to buy All Saints and St Leonard's from his brothers, and what do we think? We all sort of looked at him and said, "Dad, don't you want to just chill out and retire and just go?" Because he loved flying and he loved motorbike riding and he loved travelling, and we just couldn't believe that he wanted to kind of start again from the start, because it was really starting again.
Yeah.
And
I think he had a plan in the back of his mind for the three of us to join him. That was always his plan.
Yeah.
I'd be working in Melbourne and Eliza at 2 when we were, stuck in traffic going to our jobs in advertising, and he'd ring, say, "What are you doing?" And, "Oh, stuck in traffic again." He's like, "Well, I'm not."
It's beautiful in northeast Victoria.
My commute's easy and
Yeah,
lovely.
no traffic problems here.
Yeah, 25 degrees, blue skies. What are you doing tonight?
What's not to
Driving
love?
home. I'm going
He
out
just
for
worked
a
away at
gym.
us for...
years.
Yeah.
What were the really important developments that he made when he sort of started working on All Saints and St Leonard's?
Oh, I think he really wanted to bring, because the winemaking was done at Brown Brothers. All the grapes were taken to Brown Brothers and made at Brown Brothers for a period of years. And then when Dad took over All Saints, he really wanted to, he loved the history of the place, and he really wanted to bring everything back to the original state. So using all the old winemaking facilities, we're still using the 1890s basket press.
Wow.
To this day, because Dad really just wanted it just to be as it was when it started. And so we're doing all our reds through the basket press, which is the accountant thinks is completely ridiculous, and we probably are being a bit ridiculous, but we think it gives a nod to the tradition and the history of the place, but it's also a lovely, gentle process and a great way to make our reds. But Dad really wanted us to really be respectful of what the place was, and he did a great job of that, didn't he, Ange?
Yeah.
Got the steam engine up and running again out the back of All Saints, which was pretty cool.
The steam engine was automated the pressing process in the winery.
Right.
So all of the original engine and belts and everything are still there. So he got the steam engine going. So one day maybe we'll get the rest of it up and running, but it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, so that part of the winery, and also he brought back a sense of personality to the winery too. So, it was all, the customers just loved having him around and talking to him, and I think that was pretty special, and those customers really stuck with us since Dad died, and they kind of liked watching what we've done since he passed away. And culturally, Dad sort of built a culture that was more, it was around kind of the whole staff being family, and that was nice, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Was that a really important part, particularly in Rutherglen? The people were connecting with the fact that it was family owned, because there are, and obviously very recently, there's been a lot of discussions about, beautiful old, really important wine brands being part of a large, possibly multinational wine business, and there's a bit of tension around it. Do you think that's part of the reason people love All Saints, is because they know that family history and the fact that it's a Brown, owned business?
I think so. For Rutherglen, in the last, I suppose, 4 months, when I heard that John Casella had bought Morris's, I think I opened up quite a few bottles of wine that night, because we could just say that Rutherglen is completely family owned now.
Yeah.
There's not one business that's not family owned, and I think that's really important to me, because that the people who are running the business care and they're passionate, and they've got their hands dirty most of the time.
And they care about the community. They understand the value in employing local people who have a real sense of connection to the place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for Rutherglen, that makes it extremely special, because when customers come up, they know that Colin Campbell's probably out the back telling someone what to do, and he'll pop through cellar door and say hello and remember their name. And I think that's really important for customers to feel really connected to the place, and that's why I think most people have a kind of little special piece of their heart for Rutherglen, is because of that, ongoing history. Plus, they're really hilarious personalities. They're very funny people, and they're all very individual, and I think that's what the wine industry is about. Really, it's not about just punching out a whole lot of wine. Cheap wine. Yeah.
When your father very sadly passed away, how involved were you with the business at the time?
I was in marketing and
Already at All Saints.
already at All Saints, working with Dad.
And Nick?
He was at university studying winemaking at Adelaide.
Okay.
And Andrew was in Melbourne.
Oh yeah, I had my own little graphic design business here in Melbourne.
Right.
Yeah, so Nick immediately wanted to move back to the winery and get away and not finish his course. Eliza and I made him stay in Adelaide. He wasn't happy about that, but we said, you've got to finish it. You've only got a year left. So I think he's glad we made him do that now.
So did he do his done a couple of years outside of the business as well?
Yeah, he worked over in France for a few wineries, and then he went over to WA and worked at Mosswood for a while, and in South Australia, Bridgewater Mill. Yeah, so he did quite a bit.
Yeah.
So he got experience working in wineries in different regions, different climates, to really get an appreciation for winemaking in general, to then be able to bring that back to the family business.
Yeah, he's always been really keen to get a lot of extra knowledge from other wineries.
And he chose to go back into the vineyard for the first 2 years because he felt, which I thought was quite mature of him, was that he really needed to understand the vineyard in our area, All Saints and St Leonard's, before he could go back into the winery and really have an understanding of how to treat the fruit. And so he did a really good job, didn't he, Andrew?
Yeah.
So, but it was a pretty, full-on time for all of us. None of us really knew what we were doing. We probably still don't know now, but...
Had you, Eliza, had enough experience going back to the business and working with your dad to kind of get an idea about maybe, what was important and maybe how you wanted to evolve the business moving forward? Yeah,
I had an idea about how, from a marketing perspective, how I'd like things to be.
Right.
Dad didn't really like spending money on pretty things. He called me the director of expensive ideas. So, I would say we need new labels, we need to do this with the bottles and blah, blah, blah. But, he wasn't so keen.
And he would say, do we really need to?
Yeah, absolutely. So the wine is really
good.
Do
we need to, or do we want to?
People won't care about what they see on the front. It's the wine inside. And I said, well, they kind of do, unfortunately, Dad. Yep. So, does that answer the question, really? I don't know.
I think from when Dad died, Eliza was always the driver. Nick and I still say today, we're not sure if we'll be where we are if Eliza hadn't been just keep driving where we had to get to and ticking things off the list.
Yeah.
She's definitely been the one to keep us all going.
So a really important part of the business for you guys now is in terms of innovation, in terms of sustainability, in terms of, trying to put a bit of youthful energy into the brand, which is a really interesting approach, in my opinion, considering that it is such a historic brand and, it's multi-generational wine family. What was the plan and how did that kind of come about?
I think the first thing... No, we didn't have a plan.
Because it kind of changed from the day that Dad died.
And it was very sudden, so
Sunday, when we had the accident, and then Monday, we had to take over the business. So it was sort of...
Yeah. But the plan early on was just to keep everything afloat. And then we thought we'll just run it how it is for a bit and get immersed in it and see what we actually need and pull people in for advice.
Did you get a bit of support from the extended family?
I guess they were pretty busy doing everything that they were doing. A little bit of support, but mainly we had a really good accountant at the time, actually. He felt like he was part of the family and he was a great support. He probably knew a lot more about what was going on in terms of Dad's the business and the business finances, so he was able to pass that on. But
we did a very, very quick accounting degree within like a month.
Crash course.
We did. And then
the accountant said, okay, this is a bucket. there's 6 holes in it. You need to plug it. So we just went about plugging all the holes, really.
Yeah.
How many were you, Eliza, according to your dad?
How many of the I was a lot, actually.
And then we just sort of ran it how it was, and then a couple of years later we decided we would do a full rebranding, and we thought it was a good time to sort of make our mark on how the whole range looked. So that took 12 months or so, went through a long process, but and we used the help of our distributor at the time, who's still our distributor now, but worked closely with them about getting their thoughts on how everything looked as well. And
Interesting that the Browns family relied on the Italians in the past, and same thing with Kasama.
Yeah. I think with Sam Isherwood, she was a great mentor, really, and for me, she's very straight talking, great girl, and she really sort of told me how to sort of pitch ourselves. And now she's gone to Bimbendum, I think. And she was a great help to us, wasn't she, Ange?
yeah, really good help. But yeah, it was just finding those right people to get advice from. Everyone wanted to give advice, but not all of it was
Everyone's
handy.
got advice. Everyone's got an opinion. Doesn't make it right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and do you feel that all three of you kind of had an input into taking the brand forward, as far as Nick getting more involved in the viticulture and the winemaking, and yourselves with the communication, the branding, and as far as the marketing and business side of things?
I think for the three of us from the very start, I think there's an unspoken agreement that we all would agree on the way forward with things, and we have really, really quick little mini meetings where we ring up and all three of us will be on the phone and be, "Are you happy with that? Yes, tick, go. Are you happy with that?" And I think that's why the business is quite agile, and because we are we're like-minded in the way that we do things, and we can make decisions quickly with the facts, of course, but we can push things along pretty quickly. It's not too labour intensive to get everybody on board, except for when we bought Mount Ophir. Angela was being...
Yeah, we do have many disagreements. But we're able to sit down and talk things through, which is good. Yeah, we purchased a property on the other side of Rutherglen this year called Mount Ophir Estate, which was built in 1897. So it's another beautiful old red brick building with a round turret on the corner, sort of a French
style kind
style. But it's in disrepair, so it's probably in the same state that All Saints was when Dad and his brothers bought it. So there's a lot of work to do. And when it came up for sale, Eliza and Nick thought it was a fabulous idea. I was not so sure. I thought, oh my gosh, we don't need something else. We're so busy, and feel like we're getting All Saints and St Leonard's to a point where it's starting to fly. So I was worried about the distractions, but the time was I guess we weren't going to have that opportunity again, and someone else might have snapped it up. So we took it, and now we're working out what to do.
That's always the fun part.
It is the fun part.
We'll worry about that later.
Yeah.
Let's just buy it and then do something with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
it's a consensus view, though. Like usually, it is a consensus view. Like everything we do together.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if that's broken, the whole business is really broken. Really, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the little agreements we had from the very first day after Dad died, was that if we're no longer friends anymore, our friendships the business comes between our friendships, then it's no point. We should just give up. So,
yeah.
Just sell them. Doesn't matter. We can sit around on little empty containers for Christmas. We might have a bottle of wine together. That'd be better than just having, no friendship, I think.
Yeah.
The packaging, the branding, probably has been the boldest part of the evolution of All Saints and St Leonard's. And you've recently released, was it last year? Very, very bold new brand which I had the pleasure of tasting on my YouTube channel, was Hip Sip. Tell me a little bit about the idea with Hip Sip and particularly that amazing label.
Yeah, well, we've been, I guess, working on fortifieds for years and trying to figure out a way of capturing a younger audience with the fortifieds. And I think a lot of younger people just don't know when and how and where to drink fortified wine. They might remember their grandfather drinking them a long time ago, but they just can't place them in their lives now. So the whole idea with Hip Sip was to use some beautiful product, but also package it in a innovative way to really stand out amongst what was available on shelves in Dan Murphy stores. So we worked closely with Dan Murphy's and we got an outside designer to design a pretty crazy, colourful label all around.
Spinach.
Yeah, spinach advertising here in Melbourne. Worked closely with them. We did a lot of research and came up with a lot of concepts and came up with this one where it's all about tattoo graphics to really appeal to that age group. And the shape of the bottle is a square bottle, which is like a hip
flask.
Hip flask, yeah. So we've called it Hip Sip. So it's going really well. We do the Tawny Muscat and a Muscadel, and they're at a great price point and seem to be flying off the shelves, which is great.
Great. And I think I remember saying on my tasting video was I think part of it is showing younger consumers that you can actually do different things with it. You can put it into cocktails, and I think that particularly that bottle and that label encourages a little bit of experimentation. People trying different things, just drop some ice into it. There's no rules.
No, exactly, and that's what we were doing, having a bit of fun with it. And we actually got some cocktail recipes designed by the Drinks Cabinet in Sydney and produced a few videos with a mixologist making the cocktails, just simple cocktails with simple ingredients that people can get while they're in store buying the wine, and showing people that you can have a lot of fun with it.
I think older consumers are a bit funny about wine cocktails, but I kind of attribute a lot of the rebirth of wine cocktails to the spritz.
Yes,
I think
absolutely,
young consumers, they drink so much in terms of spritzes that they don't have any.
There's no preconceived ideas.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think that's the exciting thing. What's happening with fortifieds at the moment is that nobody really knows or has an understanding of what it was like before. So the old man standing with a brown paper bag, that's not in anybody's mind anymore. So now fortifieds are starting afresh, and this is the time where we can build it into whatever we like. And having that openness about how you serve it, what time you serve it, there are no rules anymore, as you said.
So it's all opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're really seeing a resurgence with fortified wines. And I was talking to Fiona about this last night from Seppelsfield. There's this incredible interest that is starting to flow through. After years of beating our drum, I think it's really starting to take off. And there's two different prongs of that, and it's the Hip Sip cocktail idea and that very high-end connoisseur premium, ultra premium end, which is the museum muskets that you had a look at last night. So it's really exciting. It's really exciting, and it's such a unique product, and nothing you can't copy it, really. You can't copy it. So, and it's purely Australian. So, for us, I think we've got to take up that opportunity. The accountant would like us to take that opportunity up as well. He can't understand why we've got all these millions of dollars worth of wine sitting in barrels in the hall for so long. But
get it in a bottle, sell it.
But we respect the history of it. I think, and it's. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say they don't like those wines. I've never heard anyone say that's disgusting or I don't want that, thank you. Oh, yeah.
No,
So
everyone that tries them loves them. It's fun to see people's faces in cellar door when they come in and they've never tried them before, and the look on their face is hilarious.
I love that. Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
And do you have hopes that your children will, eventually join the family business?
I think eventually, Angela and I were laughing before, saying to my daughter, how's that accounting degree going? She's only 10, but yeah.
My son's 7 and he's just started learning Chinese, and I keep saying, go, go, go. We need someone to speak Chinese.
Thinking of the future.
Yeah. All we need is a therapist and we'll be fine.
Well, look, Eliza, Angela, thank you very much for making some time. It really has been fascinating hearing more about the family and also about what the work you're doing with All Saints and St Leonard's. Would you like to share with the listeners website addresses and social media accounts so that they can actually get in touch and follow the story?
Yeah, well, we have 2 websites, allsaintswine.com.au and stleonardswine.com.au, and all the social media links are off the websites.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Thanks very much, James.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to another episode of the Vincast. I have been James Gaspbrook, also known as the Intrepid Wino, and of course, thank you very much to the Browns for joining me on this episode. It was really great to find out more about their story, and I hope to be able to visit myself very soon. If you did enjoy it, please do get in touch with them with those social media accounts and pay them a visit yourselves. If you'd like to follow me on social media, you can do so at Intrepid Wino on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. The Vincast is also on Twitter at the Vincast. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel, Intrepid Wino, one word, and you'll see lots of different videos that I post there, including my tasting videos where I have looked at some All Saints wines before. I'd love for you to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher Player, FM. That way you actually can get the newest episode as soon as it becomes available. You can get access to all the previous episodes of the show with lots of different amazing wine guests. And also it's a fantastic way to provide some feedback by leaving a rating and a review, which also does help me get the podcast out to more people. I'd love for you to visit intrepidwino.com, where you can actually find out all the different stuff that I've done in my wine career, read about my travels, and also find other ways of getting in contact with me apart from the email address, which is thevincast@gmail.com. Lots more episodes hopefully coming your way, but until then, bye.